Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Vinyl Den, your channel for record collecting by record collectors. I'm Nick.
I'm Ian.
Today we're talking about some great concept albums. There's a bunch of links down below. Make sure you go check them out. There's links for the Vinyl Den Facebook group, for the merch page, for the Spotify and Apple Music playlist we put together every week, and the Patreon page. Make sure you go check all that out. Of course, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give us a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time we release new episodes. So when it comes to concept albums, it's kind of a loose kind of term, because I think there's sometimes a lot of albums are considered concept albums. The first one I'm going to talk about is a concept album, but it's really kind of, is it really a concept album? It's kind of where I look at it. It's like very loose. It's a very kind of loose kind of concept. A lot of times I think there's kind of like a theme, an ongoing theme across an album. And then I still kind of consider it a concept album. I don't know if you kind of think the...
Well, it just depends, because, I mean, take Jethro Tull's Aqualung. Everyone called it a concept album, but the band said, no, there's no concept here. There's some similar themes in the songs, but there's no concept. So I guess it really just depends on how you look at it.
Yeah. So the first album I've got, like I said, kind of goes along that same line. It's not really like an overall, like, theme. It's not concept across the entire album, kind of like overarching themes across the album. I guess Alice Cooper, his new album Road, is kind of like that also.
Yeah.
There's kind of like a theme across it. But the album is If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power by Halsey. But it's a great album. It's probably one of my favorite albums of the last couple of years. It's not like an overall one concept for the entire album, but it definitely has this like overarching themes across the album, like motherhood and like the Madonna horror complex, and like it's just really interesting. If you go through and listen to the album, it's definitely a very cohesive album, the way they kind of crafted the whole theme together. And, you know, like I said, is it really a concept album? Maybe not, but I think it kind of still fits in the category.
My first one is going to be kind of an obvious one. Actually, I think all of mine are pretty obvious. But 2112 by Rush, theme, concept, it's all there. Intentionally a concept. I mean, all the songs are based kind of around this dystopian future. This music is outlawed, and the main protagonist is, you know, a guitar player, and he's got to fight the power.
Very common.
The only thing I would say now, there has been talk that there are elements of Ayn Rand in this. I don't see it.
I don't
you know, things like Atlas Shrugged specifically. Yeah. Atlas Shrugged, I have not read, but I've read enough about it to know I just don't see it. Aside from maybe like government control, but that comes from a whole different. That's a whole different thing. But there's a lot of people who say that there's elements of that here. I don't see it, but the music on it is great. And what I really like about it is the record company. They owed the record company one more album, and the record company said, we need you to either put out something that's going to sell with some, you know, radio hits, or we're not going to renew your contract. You guys are out. So this album was kind of a make or break, and they just said, well, what the hell? If we're going to lose our contract, might as well just go out on what we want to do.
Yeah.
And they put this out, and then, you know, the rest is history.
Another great one for me, at least in my opinion, I think it's one of the best albums of the 2000s, is The Black Parade by My Chemical Romance. This is an album that I think a lot of people don't even know that this is a concept album. But the concept of this is it's a story of a patient. I think his name is actually the patient. You know, dying of cancer, kind of looking back over his life. It's the theme of the album. It's just a great album. There's really no bad tracks on here. It's an album I still listen to pretty regularly. And like I said, a lot of people kind of missed the whole concept album thing when it came out. I know there's a quote from the band that said they wanted to create the 2000s version of The Wall. And I know that's kind of like a lofty kind of goal, but I think they kind of actually achieved some of that with this album. You know, it's one of the most popular albums of the 2000s. It's a great concept album. Probably one of the last really big concept albums commercially that we've seen, but just a great pick.
So this one might be slightly controversial because
I don't think so, but
well, it's 21st Century Breakdown by Green Day. The concept, obviously, I don't know if it's I guess it may not be obvious, but it's basically like an anarchist Romeo and Juliet, you know, and that's musically and lyrically, I put this kind of high above some of other Green Day's other albums. That's the controversy part. I really like this album. Is it better than I don't want to jump ahead because that's your next pick. But
American Idiot. We're going to talk about American
yeah,
Idiot.
I wouldn't say it's necessarily a better album than American Idiot. Conceptually, I think it is because it's a slightly more complex.
I think it's a more cohesive concept.
Yeah, I mean,
than what there is.
Both of them kind of deal with very similar the punk rock kind of anarchist kind of elements to it, but whereas American Idiot's more of a religious element to that. This is more like a literary kind of way of looking at it. Yeah. But it's got a couple of my like probably my top 5, a couple of songs that are in my top 5 of Green Day songs.
Yeah.
And that's why I just really like this album a whole lot.
Well, since you already mentioned it, I guess we can just go into
jump right into it.
And that's American Idiot. I think is this Green Day's best album? I don't think so. I think I would put probably Kerplunk and Dookie over American Idiot. It's an incredible album. And I think the one, like, if you want to talk about concept albums of the 2000s, this is the one that kind of spanned, multiple genres and brought a lot of different people into the idea of a concept album in the 2000s, because really
they weren't a thing.
No, and they hadn't been for. I mean, were there really any like big concept albums in the 90s? Maybe Melancholy is probably the big one. OK Computer, I guess. There was a couple of them, but not very many that are like huge mainstream albums like there was with American Idiot. I mean, gosh, there was a musical that came out of this, and it was and it wasn't even like the intention of the band to do this album. They had another album they had recorded previously. The story goes, I don't know if it's really true or not, that someone broke into the studio and stole the master tapes. So they sat down and rewrote the entire album, and it turned into what ended up being, probably their top 2 or 3 highest selling albums of all time.
Yeah, I would say it's probably up there with maybe their best. Really?
Well, selling no. Dookie is like hands down their highest selling album. Dookie sold over 20 million copies.
But that's over time. I mean, I like if you look at just say the first 6 months of each album,
it's still higher
than that.
It's still Dookie.
So this next one, this artist has a few concept albums, but this is actually my favorite one. It's Alice Cooper's Last Temptation, came out in '94. The concept here, so he uses the character of Steven quite a bit. Actually, most of his concept albums have Steven as the protagonist.
I think Welcome to My Nightmare is his best concept album. But
arguably this could be a prequel or sequel, depending on how you look at it, to that concept, because Steven is the protagonist in those as well, in that one as well. I like the music better on this. I love Welcome to My Nightmare, but it's never been in my top of Alice Cooper's albums. Some of the songs on there are, but not the whole album as a whole. But as far as a concept, I think this is a far more cohesive concept than Welcome to My Nightmare, where Welcome to My Nightmare is a bit more abstract. Yeah. And this is a bit more defined. And to the extent that there was even a comic book done for this by Neil Gaiman. He wrote the comic book. And as far as other concepts by Alice Cooper, From the Inside maybe arguably is a better concept, but again, music's just so much better on this album than it is on From the Inside. And like I said, the cohesiveness of the concept, you've got contributions by Chris Cornell on 2 songs on this, so you can't go wrong with that. Yeah. So yeah, Last Temptation by Alice Cooper.
So of course I can't talk about concept albums without talking about The Wall. I think it's the best concept album of all time. As far as like albums overall, I'd probably put it in my top 10, maybe top 15. Of course, there is no denying the fact that this is a concept album. It ended up being turned into a movie. I don't know if people even a lot of people out there even realize the movie came like years after the release of this album. It was like 4 years after the fact.
No, it came out in '82. It's 3 years.
So 3 years, whatever. But the what ended up being the final cut was going to be the soundtrack for The Wall. Yeah. Of course, things changed though. But just listening to this album, I know a lot of people think there's a lot of filler on here, and for the longest time I kind of considered that, thought that same way. But like, there's not a song on here that you can really cut out and not lose part of the story. it's really kind of all one long song broken up into a bunch of different little pieces. And it, Roger Waters did, I think, his best work kind of crafting the overall overarching theme and concepts of this album.
My last one, again, this is no surprise to anybody. Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull. The mother of all concepts. That was what they went into the studio to. If Aqualung is going to be called a concept album when it's not, let's give them a full-blown, over-the-top concept. And ultimately, the concept is kind of making fun of concept albums and making fun of the pretentiousness of progressive rock, really, while still being part of that and making fun of themselves in the process. And musically and lyrically, the concept isn't in the song. It's in the artwork, and it's in what is billed as how the album came to be.
Yeah.
The music and lyrics are all a poem. I guess that's a concept, but the poem was supposedly written by this fictional 9-year-old boy, Gerald Bostock, that Jethro Tull. It was a controversial poem, so Jethro Tull has decided to put music to it and release it as an album. Ultimately, the band and Ian Anderson wrote all of the music and the lyrics.
Well, that's all we got for today, guys. Thanks for checking the show out. Make sure you drop us a comment down below. Let us know some of your favorite concept albums of all time. There's a bunch of great ones out there. We could have went on longer than the ones we listed, but let us know what you guys think. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give us a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button down below. That's all we got. Until next time.
Talk to y'all later.
Keep on spinning. Peace.